want to get to Mark Carney so we don't miss that very important point. You recently posted on X. I found this quite interesting. After printing too much money at the Bank of England, promoting disastrous net zero policies in banking, he's now killing economic plans for Canada. It seems Mark Carney wants to inflict these terrible ideas on Canada. What are your memories of Mark Carney as the governor of the Bank of England? He likes to say that he saved the British economy. He likes to brag about being indispensable to British recovery as the governor of the Bank of England. What are your memories of Mark Carney and his success or failure?
Well, if you look at the British economy, at the turn of the century, we were catching up with the United States in terms of GDP per capita. The average Brit is now $34,000 worse off than the average American. So what we've seen over the last 25 years is economic stagnation. And that economic stagnation accelerated after the financial crisis. And one of the main culprits in the failure to revive the British economy is the Bank of England and the terrible monetary policies they pursued, printing too much money, enabling too much government spending. Mark Carney in particular was fixated on net zero and one of the key proponents of Britain hosting COP26, one of the key proponents of us committing to even more unrealistic and disastrous net zero targets. And if you look at Britain's economy now, we haven't had any serious economic growth for quite some time. We've had too much immigration, so GDP per capita is actually lower than it was. And we've got the highest energy prices in the world, thanks to those net zero policies. But not only did Mark Carney advocate those policies as governor of the Bank of England, at the last election, he backed Rachel Reeves, the now Labour Chancellor, who has made the situation even worse through tax rises, through more net zero policies, through more government regulation. And Britain is teetering on the brink now of a financial crisis. So it may have looked smooth at the time, what the Bank of England did, but it was a sugar rush to the British economy that actually damaged our long-term productivity. It damaged the capacity of the private sector, and we are now suffering the consequences. And the fact that he backed such an extremist Labour manifesto, I think, shows the types of policy that he would want to pursue if selected to be Prime Minister of Canada.
So you wouldn't recommend Mark Carney for Canadians because, as you know, he's running right now for the leadership of the Liberal Party to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's the front runner. And of the cabinet.
What I would suggest to people is they look at the record of the Bank of England. They look at what happened with inflation in Britain, and we've had a huge inflation crisis. They look at what's happened to productivity in Britain, and they also look at Britain's net zero policies, which Mark Carney was a major advocate of, and they see how those policies have worked out. And they're not working out well for the British people. The level of satisfaction with the British government is incredibly low. The Chancellor, who Mark Carney backed, is incredibly unpopular. So, and what we're seeing around the world, and the biggest example was in the United States when Donald Trump was elected, is an utter rejection of this whole worldview. You know, the worldview of fossil fuels are bad, we need net zero, we should be importing solar panels from China, the worldview of national institutions aren't important, we've got to outsource all these decisions to international bodies like the UN and the IMF and the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization. Voters are rejecting this. You know, they are angry in Britain. They've rejected this in America, electing Donald Trump. And I would be extremely surprised if the Canadian people want this agenda. So it's surprising to me that Mark Carney is even in the running for this job.
Well, we've had 10 years of the net zero agenda under Justin Trudeau, and I would define net zero.
At least in Canada, you're still producing oil and gas. In Britain, that's pretty much come to a halt. So the situation in Britain is much worse. Our energy costs are, as I've said, the highest in the world. So we are suffering from an extreme version of those policies.
Well, certainly it's more severe. And Mark Carney is backing away from his carbon tax, which he was very much the intellectual author of. Justin Trudeau continues to punish Canadians with a carbon tax. He has not backed away, meaning Mark Carney has not backed away from net zero, which is a nice way, of course, of punishing your oil and gas industry to reach an arbitrary level for climate change, which, of course, is completely designed and created by the authors of the climate change hysteria. And that is where we are with Mark Carney. But you mentioned Donald Trump, the recent re-election of Donald Trump as president. Do you think this represents a reversal, or at least a stop, to the trend towards globalist and socialism?
Yes, it does. And last year I wrote a book called 10 Years to Save the West, which was saying that unless we took on those leftist ideologies, whether it's wokeism, transgender extremism, net zeroism, Islamism, all of these ideas which are fundamentally against Western civilization and have infiltrated our institutions, infiltrated our media, infiltrated our bureaucracy, we were going to lose the battle and we were going to lose Western civilization. And Donald Trump's election is the first sign that the people are rebelling. The people of our nations are rebelling against this agenda, which has done huge harm to people. I've seen in Britain, our towns and cities struggling, our manufacturing industry closing down. The last steel works that produce steel from scratch in Britain closed down last year. I've seen the damage this agenda has done and how angry people are about it. And that is what we saw from the American people, that despite all the nonsense that was promulgated in the mainstream media, they voted for Trump because they knew that things had to change.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid, folks. Don't listen to Justin Trudeau. We need this kind of attitude in Canada right now, because let me tell you, Justin Trudeau will fight tooth and nail to stay as leader of the Liberal Party and as Prime Minister of Canada, and he will use every trick in the Liberal handbook to do that. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to have perseverance to fight this battle to the end. As I've been saying since this station went on the air, we need to resolve to resist. And we need to fight for our free speech and our democratic rights to say what we believe, to speak, as John Diefenbaker said. And don't forget that t-shirt that's available out there in the store. I speak as a free Canadian, free to speak, free to believe in what I choose. And Justin Trudeau is not going to interfere with that. Thanks for being a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right Resistance, and we'll see you again soon. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need to resolve to resist.